samyagyanena brahmacharyena nityam antaha sharirehi jyotirmayo hi shubraha yam pashanti yatayaha kshinadoshaha om shantihi shantihi shantihi. The Atman, the indivisible self in all living beings and all things, is realized by knowledge, by austerity, by moderation, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it everywhere, existing in everything, even here, in this very mind and body. Om, peace, peace, peace. And there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us, and may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. We are all here at the SRV Association's ashram in Hawaii on the Big Island, gathered in our fullest complement today. And we are eager to make some more inroads into the Atma Upanishad, having looked into some other beautiful Upanishads over the last few weeks. I mean, taking up whole scriptures takes months of study over long periods of time, but with these shorter Upanishads I've been selecting, we can go through them in 2 or 3 weeks and still be pretty thorough. I thought last week our study of just the one section with 4 slokas, although they're very long slokas, was very complete, and I was in a good mindset to be able to explicate and explain every line that came up in that particular Upanishad. And that was just in section 1, which had 4 very long slokas in it. And section 2 has another 25 slokas. So the section 2 is fitting, is all about the eternal Atman. We know that the first 4 slokas of the Atma Upanishad gave us this unique view of the Atman being in everything and in everyone, as I just chanted from the Upanishads. And you just need some tapas and some jnanam and some austerity and some wisdom to begin to thin out those coverings of ignorance in the mind, so that when you do this practice, as the Upanishad said so nicely, then the Atman will just stand forth. So it sort of indicates that millions of people are allowing this covering of ignorance to remain there, and therefore not being able to see the obvious, or the great self, as Buddha even called it. And also other things that get veiled are the divine Shakti herself, who will lift those veils for you, who is the mother of wisdom and the mother of the words, the Vakdevi. And what to speak of then the formless Brahman, which maybe you have a little bit more of an excuse to not see that. It's like sweetness in sugarcane juice. You drink the juice, have the enjoyment of that, but you never see the crystals of the sugar in it. In that way, I think a lot of people who are just believers in God, they taste the crystals of Brahman in everything, but they're really having the experience of the thing itself, that is the objects. So the senses tend to have a habit then of focusing and fixing on the objects, as the father of yoga told us in the 8-limbed yoga. which he systematized again for us in about 140 AD. And then great commentaries were written on that systematization of Raja Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga, all the way up to our own Swami Vivekananda, whom we worship here and look as our great guide, particularly in this steep cliff or ascent of Jnanam. Jnanam is noted for having its neti path, that is, not this path. Other religions like Buddhism and Jainism and so forth also followed closely to that negation kind of idea, but they didn't make systematized teaching out of it like Vedanta did. It became known and used by monastic communities, sannyasins, and so forth, long-standing in their search for moksha or liberation from everything that gets in the way of our of this eye opening, as Krishna even says in the Gita, Jnana Chakshu. So it's good to know that if we can do have a method in practice, do sadhana, that those veils will fall away after a time if we remain persistent. And then we can behold the Atman existing in everything and in everyone. And one of the things Vedanta says about that is it's the same in quality and in quantity. So it's like you can't look at, say an animal and say, oh, it doesn't have the Atman in it. You can't look at a plant or an insect and say it doesn't have the Atman in it. The Atman is there in both quality and quantity in everything, but the degree of that it's realized it, or that it has the ability to realize it, that's the difference. And Vivekananda pointed that out to us, that cows grazing in the grass day after day for months and months, years and years, are not putting forth any effort to realize the cow Atman in them, if you want to put it that way. But the human being has this ability to do so, can focus and burn away those layers. Like we were saying yesterday at satsang, find your way to Brahman and then light the fire of knowledge there and warm your hands daily on it. In the presence of Brahman, in the presence of Guru, in the presence of the Dharma teachings, in the presence of the Sangha, don't wander away and then light a fire somewhere else or fail to light a fire whatsoever in your life. And then you can keep the warmth of realization of I am Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman, with you at all times. So these are, of course, the precious teachings of the Upanishads and Vedas given to us by the luminaries called rishis in India and yogis, and also given other turns just as deep and sometimes wide as methods like tantric rituals and other practices that India is known for. So the one that's specific to the Upanishads then quite often is this path of filtering through the changing. And I think it's exactly what Jesus meant when he said, "Get thee behind me." So he wasn't talking about a devil, because who's ever seen one that isn't already in human form, maybe. The devil in Mr. Jiva, if you want to put it that way. But we have seen the devilish things that come into the mind and cause us suffering. And those are the things which you have to observe and specify and then filter and put behind you. And the more you do that, the longer you can sustain such a practice, the more possible it is for you to see that divine light or that divine sound, hear that divine sound, or have the realization of that ocean of Brahman with its nectar-like swell of the Atman, as Shankara says. Witness your Atman that's swelling on the breast of Brahman. So the Jivatman, or the Jivakoti, has separated itself from the knowledge that that's my Atman there in Brahman. Now I'm a separate self. I'm a separate Atman, right? So this is why our Rishi here is telling us, and we went through it enough last week, to only have to take a quick a 5-minute review of it to know that he's talking about the Bahya Atman and the Atma, the Antar Atman, when we talk about things that are changing and things which are masquerading, sometimes masquerading for the real self. Say the small self and the inner self, but then there's the great self. Again, that was even in the Dhammapada, as reported by the Arhats when they gathered around Lord Buddha after Buddha passed away and formed that first Buddhist scripture, ironically called the smaller vehicle, but that was just because it was for a smaller group of qualified beings who were at the task of trying to realize their Buddha nature and get nirvana. And it wasn't necessarily a large vehicle which the whole of humanity could pass for, like we see, for instance, right now with the coming of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. That Holy Mother said that now he's found a path for everyone in this age. They can all go to realize their true self, take substantial steps in their spiritual life to move closer to their true nature and realize it in this very lifetime. That's like the Malaya breeze, they say, that blows in India. It's supposed to turn all trees into sandalwood. So everyone's celebrating, even those people who are evil-minded say, oh, good, then I'll be able to realize the Atman too, but oh, not so fast there. There's some trees that don't turn to sandalwood, Sri Ramakrishna said, in that breeze of grace, like bamboo is always hollow. The banyan tree, and the cottonwood tree. And there's the three kinds of trees that the breeze can blow on them. That's the breeze of divine grace, but they won't turn into sandalwood like all the others. So there has to be some sort of measure by which sincerity and humility and serious interest will make you qualified for approaching this great path called Vedanta, and that Swami Vivekananda brought to us. So in the meantime, we have it on good record with Angaras and other great rishis that we've been looking at, that they give us these teachings. So Angaras said basically this: the outer Atman is skin, flesh, hair, thumb, fingers, backbone, nails, ankles, stomach, navel, sexual organ, hips, thighs, cheeks, ears, brows, forehead, flanks, head, eyes. They all formulate and they dissolve. That's why you can't call it the eternal Atman, because it's non-eternal. It's always coming and going. It's always changing. So immediately rule of thumb comes forward that the Neti practices, oh, that changed. That can't be what I'm looking for. It can be, it doesn't have to be rejected unless I have an attachment to it. And some people form gross attachments to things that are changing, as we can see by our own world here in this day and age. In the Kali Yuga, they call it. But then he's talking about the next level of Atman that people can move to once they say, na manas na buddhi na hamkara, when they realize that I'm not the body and so forth, then I have to turn around and take a look at my inner self. That is, and that's a problem for people who have an attraction to psychic powers, people who think that metaphysics is the end instead of going deeper, people who are intellectual and they think that they found the truth when they find their intellect, and it's still focused on lower knowledge, and it doesn't satisfy them by the time the end of their life comes and they don't get free. Some of them don't even believe in God and get salvation. So that has the drawback of the Antaratman, the inner self. Sometimes you hear the word inner self and think, God, there it is, the Atman. Wrong. They say, basically, that is an unchanging verity, the eternal self. And so the Antaratman changes it's made of subtle elements, not the gross elements like out here, but subtle elements. Tanmatras are called. It has desire in it that causes it to change day to day. It has a attraction and aversion, which Father of Yoga gave us two kleshas or barriers to spiritual life. It has pleasure and pain. It always suffers delusion and doubt, and its memory is a very positive attribute, but it doesn't always get utilized in the right way, like to remember Brahman, as we were saying yesterday at satsang. Shri Bulana, Bulana, I sing sometimes. Don't forget to remember your divine mother, Sri Durga. She's the mother of memory. And then it's talks about speech is very important in India and in Sanskrit. Pitch, accent, what's accentless, what's short, what's long, and what's prolate as far as vowels are concerned. So they bring forth in this Upanishad the power of speech because they're talking about something that's as profound as the Vakdevi, the goddess of words. And there are certain rules that are followed and certain meanings that are deeper than again the intellectual can find in words, just to explain things that work outwardly, but they don't explain the inner cosmos, how that works, like how karma works, for instance, how rebirth works. Who's ever explained that, who's just a worldly intellectual or an individual? You have to go to somebody who's a specialist for that, and they'll start you off by talking about prana. Oh, you have a life force. Man does not live by bread alone. There's something else that's going on inside of you. You'd say the outer prana would be attached here, and the next psychic prana would be attached here. But here you'd have the Chit Shakti herself. That is the power of intelligence as it flows to this highest realm of realization. So anyway, back to the word, they see how important it is for the mind to discover words. You know who said that? Become a master of words and a master of philosophy. Can you imagine who said that? Lord Buddha said that when he lived in his life. It's not usually, Buddhists sometimes say, words are not important, let's just meditate. But wait a minute, you haven't mastered the words yet. You haven't mastered the philosophy, and then you're going to go meditate somewhere? What about Lord Buddha himself, who said you must become a master of these philosophies and understand them well and deeply? And that's the role of two things, thought and word. But we know here that thought is father to the deed and the word. So the thought has to be pure for the word to be pure and for the deed to follow through. And that'll free you from accumulating negative karma, which is one of those things you want to get behind you. So then there's the experience of the senses. That is, the mind is definitely operating five senses and enjoying through them. It's also suffering through them. The agent and self of knowledge, that's the ego, and its contact with chitta, with buddhi and chitta, the intellect and its thoughts. Not very nicely drawn out here. And just the teaching of the Antakarana, basically, and Samkhya Yoga, it goes way back. And then all these activities that you might say, well, walking, dancing, singing, playing on an instrument and all that, isn't that a part of this Atman? But it's all, you have to take it back to its source. Like, for instance, I'm not walking right now, but if I think walk, I'll stand up and walk. So you have to trace these things back to their subtle causes in the mind and know that the outer Atman obeys the inner Atman, or should obey the inner Atman, but the inner Atman has to be pure mind, in order for acts and thoughts and words and deeds outward to become pure, so that karma is not formulated. It's all very well put together. And then you have the mention in this Upanishad of discrimination. So as if to put a kind of exclamation point on it all, when they're talking about the inner self, earth, water, fire, air, ether, desire, aversion, pleasure, pain, delusion, doubt, memory, and hearer, smeller, taster, leader, agent, and self of knowledge, shouting, enjoying, dancing, walking, singing, playing on instruments, that is the ancient spirit that distinguishes between Nyaya and Mimamsa. That is, Nyaya didn't quite do it for India. Mimamsa came along and put the conclusion on everything. That's the Vedanta, basically. So it has to discriminate between the early philosophy and a more developed form of philosophy that got experienced by great rishis and yogis who then could verify that this is the truth. There are Atmic axioms, there are Mahavakyas, there's what's called non-duality, and there's what's called higher wisdom. And all of these things will come along, and the mind can take these up, and then it become no mind. See? No matter, no mind, no matter. My teacher used to say, no matter, never mind. So we would sit and think about that for weeks, and sometimes he'd say it in a talk, and so, no mind, no matter. So he's saying, if there's no mind, matter wouldn't be here. It's not just that when you fall asleep, matter disappears, right? So you could make a point for that. But it's really that matter is actually created by the thoughts in the mind. It's solidified by the thoughts in the mind. And that's true here, and that's true with the cosmic mind too, God's mind. We'll think something first, and then it'll turn into a world or something solid later. If you just watch the process long enough, you'll see this happening. So no mind, no matter. There can be no matter coming if your mind is not engaged. But if there's no matter, then never mind, because matter brings all the problems with it, right? Attachment to objects and forgetfulness of your true nature. So that's why it ends with no matter, well, never mind. You know, in other words, let's not even think about it. And not even thinking about it is here. And thinking is here. And then acting is here. So this is why he's putting together these three aspects of our Atman conveniently for us into three levels. And it was that, I didn't put the subtitle up there, but I was thinking, you know, the three levels of the self, the three states of the Atman. So that you always hear that Atman is one, non-dual, one with Brahman and so forth. But he's coming down a step for that to let us include in the Vedantic all-inclusive way that all of this is Brahman, because they've also said that to us. So how are we going to understand that? We're going to have to take up every little thing in our outer Atman and then connect it to our inner Atman, take up every little thing in our inner Atman, which is done by finally discriminating between things like these two kinds of philosophies. I mean, I think it says etc. here, so they mean everything that's said in Nyaya, everything that's said in the Mimamsa, everything that's said in Yoga, and everything that's said in Vaisheshika. There's 6 of these different darshanas in India, which people use as methods to realize the truth. And that pretty much covers, in a quick review, the two forms of Atman. And then we have our true self, the unchanging Atman. And we don't even need to go through all this again, because we can look back on that, but we can just then use it right now to jump into our study, further study of the second section of this Upanishad. I'll just share a few of the slokas with you here. They said there's like 31 of them, actually, 28, but then ending with the chant on one of the peace chants, Om Bhadram Karnabhihi. So basically, here's what it says. I think I read a few of these at the end of last class. We were here on this chart when we were finishing up the two different sides of the sentient and the insentient, which is 2 ways of putting a triple teaching here, right? So you've got the 3 forms of Atman delineated well, but if you want to put it into a more twofold form, you can change it into what's sentient and what's insentient. But they all come up out of Atman. They all rise up out of Brahman. And without affecting Atman or Brahman is an important point they quickly add. So let's do 2.1, section 2, sloka 1. The good named Atman is pure. One and non-dual always. It's in the form of Brahman, and Brahman alone shines forth from it. Even as the world with its distinctions, such as affirmation and negation, etc., nonetheless, Brahman shines forth. So whether you see the thing and you distinguish between the Nyaya and the Mimamsa, and you're wanting to make a clear distinction between what's changing and what's not changing, then he says, whatever the case, as you enter into the act of negation or affirmation, it doesn't change Brahman at all. Brahman's the truth. So this is called starting out in the right footing or right orientation in the Eightfold Path of Lord Buddha. You must have this early on so that doubts can't creep in later and ruin your progress inward. So you affirm that that Brahman is one and non-dual without a second. Brahmadvitiya, it's called in Sanskrit. And then the next affirmation is soon to come, and I am that. The Atman is all there is, all that exists, and thou art that. Echoes in our mind from Swami Vivekananda's Sangha to Sannyasin poem. So that was 2 slokas, but I'm stopping there. Even as the world with its distinctions like affirmation and negation happen, nonetheless, Brahman alone shines forth. So let's look at that, as we have pretty much completed this chart for this class study. And here's a chart that can explain to us the dynamics of affirmation and negation. So there again, this is called iti iti and neti neti. So when we entered into Vedantas in our 20s, or early 20s, and found teachers like Swamis, then we were hearing neti neti a lot here in the West. Occasionally we hear somebody say iti iti, and we said, well, what's that? So we began to research it. I mean, neti neti is not this, not this. Then we heard that iti iti is all this, all this. So naturally, we wanted to, in our Western way, we wanted the quick fix. We wanted to jump straight to, what's that teaching of all this, as if we could have it, without having done the regimen of practice needed for neti neti. You satisfy not this first, and then you get iti iti as a matter of course. But if you're still attached to some things out there and you haven't renounced them as unchanging and not the anatman, the not atman, like for instance, such subtle things that are in your ego, then you're going to have to try and claim the iti iti standpoint, but you'll have all those barriers in the way. And the last Upanisad we studied, Vajrasuchika, right? That it was saying that you can't fit the thread of a needle, with any fibers sticking out of it through the eye of a needle. So you wet your hands and you take the thread and you smooth it out, but there's still a little fiber there that you can't see with the naked eye. You try and put it through the eye of the needle, it won't fit, it keeps resisting. That would be what it was like to try and attain iti standpoint when you haven't completed neti neti yet. So nonetheless, we're seeing how both of these, in this double helix of Maya here, she dances, are so intertwined and so helpful to one another as you do the practice. So here's one way of putting it. When the human being realizes reality, Parabrahma, in form of samadhi, the mentally projected phenomena of name and form in time and space disappears, demonstrating its ephemeral nature. If the fully awakened soul should return to embodiment after knowing the non-dual truth, however, the entire world reveals nothing but Brahman. So then it's covering all bases there. First, you took the unreal to be the real, and you hadn't practiced neti neti yet. So in that way, the Atman, your true nature, was never showing itself to you. And you weren't seeing it in your family, and you weren't seeing it in your teacher, and you weren't seeing it in humanity. You weren't seeing it in nature. It was always elusive. A nice word there. Asked someone the other day if they had enough money. No, that's very elusive. Dollars are real elusive these days, he said. So that's also the nature of this truth that we're trying to find out. It's hard to find that. So if you then find a teacher, do the practice, get the mantra, study the scriptures, and do your devotional practices, as the chant said, that starts to thin out the veils in front of your awareness or your perception. And that's called, turning the double I single. Dvaita mula maho dukam nanyatasya Vaisajam, says the Avatut in the Avatutta Gita, says the primal error of double vision causes the soul to suffer. Dvaita mula maho, right, these mula imperfections, Dvaita, dualism, dukkam, suffering. Dual vision causes the mind to suffer. And only hearing the truth of I am Brahman, the self is Brahman, will cause the I to be single again. Yeah. Beautiful from the Avatut in the Avatutta Gita. So only hearing that. Why is that? Because the self is non-dual by nature, and thou art that. That's why. I've got two very good reasons why that's true. And the Avatut has realized those reasons. So that's what's meant here. The mentally projected phenomena of name and form and time and space disappears. So if that hasn't disappeared for you yet, then you want to go back and you want to reorient yourself to that non-dual way of thinking. Qualify yourself early, then put yourself back in meditation, then put your eyes back on the scriptures, and then put your body before the altar, bowing down, offering flowers, and then do all your work as worship. Those are the 4 yogas. But you want to do them all in that specific way that's fully conscious. But then it goes on to say, the fully awakened soul can return to embodiment after realizing the non-dual truth. See? So that's going to be what's called the Jivan Mukta ideal. He's going to become a Jivan Mukta, come back free, like we saw Swami Vivekananda, although he was a Nitya Siddha, Sri Ramakrishna said, a perfect, ever perfect soul. So there you see, and we don't have to take a long time in it, 2 columns, basically. The Neti Neti column of not this, and the Iti Iti column of all this. And then down the middle are some of the cosmic principles that come into play when we want to work on realizing this. You can call it purification, if you like, of mind. So probably best to start with Neti Neti down here, because these are very high levels of Abhava Yoga and Maha Yoga. I mentioned them in satsang yesterday. Abhava Yoga would be the highest state which somebody practicing Neti Neti would change. Abhava means that's it. No words, no thoughts, no moods, no forms. It's abhava means nothing, no moods to encounter there. No great samadhis. It's a samadhi in itself. It's just to have the glass of yourself emptied into the ocean of Brahman. Then the glass is, throw it away. That's how to try and explain non-dual abhava. But the person practicing iti is going to have Maha Yoga. It means that everything that's possible to experience will be in the possession of that soul. You could say, look at Sri Ramakrishna, how many different kinds of samadhis he had. He was having both of these kinds of experiences. But he didn't have to practice Neti Neti anymore. Obviously, he was telling others how to do it. So if you start down here again, you see that I am not the 5 elements is the Neti Neti practice, right? And there's the 10 senses, Pancha Mahabhutas, right? this is twice times pancha really, but basically the senses of knowledge and the senses of action are 10. So I'm not the 5 elements, and nonetheless, the 5 elements exist in me. So if you could practice neti neti and say, well, then those don't exist, right? Let's even them out. Let's destroy them. No, you can't destroy anything. Everything exists at all times. Who's ever going to destroy the 5 elements? How many billions and billions of souls, even here just on this earth alone, are going to be bereft if you happen to somehow be able to destroy the 5 elements of air, earth, fire, water, and ether? So you say, then they exist within me. Let's go back to our inner Atman and our outer Atman. You'll see, remember, everything outer, I need to neti about that. And I come back and I can see, well, this exists in my inner self. Not so hard to make that jump and to affirm that. Now the 5 elements are within me. How can I prove that? Because I dreamed about them last night. My senses were not connected to my outer body and to the outer elements. They saw inner elements, and I sported amongst the inner elements in my dreams. So that's where they are. Kings of heaven are within you, is how to understand that. So that's first level, neti neti. I'm not the 5 elements. Next is I am not the senses of cognition and action. That's these connected here to these senses see nothing but Brahman at all times. So if you had the iti iti complement to neti neti, you would have the realization that those are not real. Those are changing all the time. But yet I use them. The mind uses them to produce worlds and to have experiences. Hands off on the attachment, though. And there you see the dasa indriyas, the 10 senses right there. Up the middle are the actual principles that are being renounced. You might say temporarily renounced from the standpoint of attachment, but from the standpoint of everything is, sarvosmi, they call that. You started out with om, na, mano buddhi hamkara chittani naham. You know how that sounds, right? It's a famous stotram that Shankara wrote. He sang, Om mano buddha hamkara chittani naham nacha shrotra jive nacha grana netre nacha vyoma bhumi nateja navayo chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham First verse of 6, Shankara sings, I am neither mind, intelligence, ego, nor chitta. Chitta is the thoughts. Neither ears, nor tongue, nor the senses of smell or sight am I, right? So the 5 elements in the 10 senses, he pretty much covers that along with the mind in the first verse of Nirvana Shatkam, it's called. Nor am I ether, earth, fire, water, or air. What am I then? Chidananda Rupaha. I'm the very form of consciousness, Chid. Shivoham, Shivoham. I am Shiva, he adds, from his own sampradaya, that is, non-dual Shaivites of Shankara order that he was keeping in existence through the 4 padas of Shiva at the behest of his guru, Govindapada, at the behest of his Parama guru, Gaudapada. So we have this great line of Shaivites who are coming along, and they're writing stotrams about Neti, 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 Neti. I am none of that changes. What am I then? I'm pure conscious awareness. I'm Shiva. I'm Shiva. If you looked at the God blogs last week, you saw that one, watch Shiva dissolve, right? Sri Ramakrishna himself is saying that if a man worships Shiva and gets his vision, is that it? Oh, I just see Jesus, or I just saw Shiva, or I just saw Ramakrishna. No, they'll say, watch me now. Look at this, you see. And then as you look at the inner vision, Shiva dissolves back into the light of Brahman. And that's how man sees Brahman finally. Beautiful, huh? There's no other way he was going to see Brahman under his own efforts, his own, maybe not even under his own austerities, unless they were very intense, you see. But the chosen ideal will help you see that light of Brahman. And sometimes people don't have an ishtam to appear for them to point them to Brahman, but they will still have the vision of the light of Brahman. I saw the light. Yeah, well, you didn't see the ishtam standing in front of it. See, so they were both there. There was a guide. You just didn't acknowledge him yet, or her. So beautiful, huh? He goes on to sing, Nacha prana sango, navai pancha vayu, navasapta dhatu, nava pancha koshaha. What are the 5 pancha koshas? What are those? Body, prana, mind, intellect, ego. Famous teaching, the Adara system in Vedanta, very old, how to do your neti neti of all this very quickly. Those 5 things, I am not. It covers the whole gamut, doesn't it, of everything. If I say I'm not the body, then of course I wouldn't be the 5 elements that made it. And if I'm not the prana, that wouldn't be the senses that it flows through in order for me to operate the senses. If I'm not the mind, it wouldn't be the thoughts that are bothering me or sometimes lifting me up. If I'm not the intellect, so forth and so on. So neti neti, all that. Neti neti. Oh, neti neti, the buggas. Get rid of them for good. Then they can come back, dancing back later, like Sri Ramakrishna said, like controlling a snake after taking out the fangs and the poison. Now you can impress your friends, you see, with the snake wrapped around your neck. So you remove the poison and the danger from these, which is pretty much called attachment, aversion, clinging to life, egotism, ignorance, and greed, shame, fear, delusion. The 6 passions, the 8 fetters, and the 5 kleshas. If you can remove all of that and distance yourself from things in that way, then you can go back later and possess them dharmically. So you can use them for dharmic life, says the Guru, for divine life, says the luminary, and for eternal life, says the Lord Jesus. You can use them all because now they don't have any problem. So nacha prana sangha, I'm not the prana that flows through everything. Panchavayu, I'm not the 5 airs. I'm not the sapta dhatu, the 7 elements of the body. I'm not panchakoshaha, the 5 sheaths. He goes on with 6 verses like this. I don't want this to become a class on the Nirvana Shatkam, which I have done several times before. But how nicely then it illustrates the point of this beautiful process of neti neti. Mm-hmm. And I would venture to say that it's not just for monks and sannyasins, that for advanced householders and forest dwellers, people who are distancing themselves from work and wealth and so forth, trying just to do their sadhana, that this neti neti is going to be a very powerful addition to your method. This is all just commentary on the first 2 slokas, you see. And so if you look up this, then the next level of this, I am not the ever-changing mind. Is that what it says there? I am not the ever-changing, vital forces of nature. Nonetheless, on the iti side, this insentient life force exists for the sentient self, right? They say, well, I'm not the prana, so the prana says bye-bye, and you fall down dead, right? So you don't want to piss off the god of prana. See, it's very important. So you deify him and all his 5 forms, the vital airs we just talked about. Well, I'm not those, but they're very important to conduct spiritual life with and to help others. So that's where on the opposite side you say this. Notice it says, I'm not the 5 elements, but they exist for me. No, the insentient prana exists for me. We don't want to mix this up. One of the problems between realizing the bahya Atman, outside, all those things that change, and moving inside to the subtle Atman, the antar Atman, is that people get caught up then in the prana. Like I was talking, the metaphysicians, the occultists, the sensationalists, and both the father of yoga and more recently Swami Vivekananda has said that they miss out on realizing the rain cloud of virtues, Dharma, Mega Samadhi, by falling in under the influence of prana and its powers. And somebody talked to Sri Ramakrishna about that, how this person could do marvelous things. And Sri Ramakrishna yawned and just said, that's just the work of prana. It's like, get over it. You know, you'll never realize the truth if you exercise those forces. Krishna says so in the Gita. Sri Ramakrishna says so in the Gospel. So people aren't getting a clue for that and distancing themselves not only from 5 elements and 5 senses and so forth, but also from the way prana acts and what it can get for them. I've often said the most addictive substance in the 3 worlds is not opium or cocaine or whatever drug people are into, or alcohol, or even lands and wealth and money. The most addictive substance in the entire 3 worlds is prana. People get hooked on that, and then they get hooked on the wheel of transmigration, in which prana flows. And the psychic prana that takes them up and out, that's mentioned by Patanjali and Swami Vivekananda, never occurs to them. That's the prana of higher thought. And this is why, you'll get it as you pass through this double matrix of Maya. If you have a good teacher, if you have scriptures with you, if you have a human body, and if you have a will to be free, those are the 4 things Shankara says you need to succeed at this. Let's just go on up, finish this chart. The next entry is, I am not the ego, the mind, its thoughts, or the intellect. That's what I just sang. Om mano buddha hamkara chittani naham. You should memorize that one line of the Nirvana. Mano, mind, buddha, intellect, ahamkara, ego, chittani, thoughts. How beautiful he puts it like that. Om mano buddha hamkara chittani naham. You could walk around with that ancient mantra, revivified in 700 AD by Shankara putting it into the Nirvana Shatkam as almost the first most important thing that you'd want to distance yourself from. That is, you want to use it. Well, let's see what it says here. I'm not the ego, mind, its thoughts, or the intellect, but Brahman is perceived through every modification of the mind. And someone told me where that occurs. That's a quote from the Upanisad. Yeah. So we have that on one of our chant lists to memorize. 7 times 10 it is now, I think, instead of just 7 times 4, the Shanti peace chants. That Brahman is perceived by every modification of the mind. So that's, you cannot say that if you are still attached to the ego, mind, intellect, and thoughts in this limited way. You haven't yet seen that oh, I'm not those, and had a realization that I'm not them, but I can use them. That's a very subtle distinction. Usually when someone uses something, they become attached to it. You have to be able to utilize this and stay free from it. That's pretty much a summation of it all. We don't want to pass by a few things. On the way from prana to mind, we saw that this is the way in which they're validating this kind of inner movement, is that now we can call this Saguna Brahman. I'm beginning to get to the apex of iti, all this, all this. So now I can look back on those things that were in my way, and I can call it the changing Brahman. And so the rishis call that Saguna. It's with qualities, but those qualities don't impede the Atman or limit it or change it in any way. It's always changeless, as is seen by the opposite side, Nirguna Brahman. When you're realizing this and you see that the insentient life force and everything else exists for the sentient self, and one is able to see the unchanging Brahman as the backdrop to everything else. And along the Neti path, then Avava Yoga is reached. You've been able to annul everything, neutralize everything, empty out everything, distance yourself from everything that could possibly act as an obstacle or an impediment in your way to seeing the pure conscious awareness or existence itself. Let's see. Up the middle there, we had to deal with the 10 senses, the 5 elements, the 10 senses, the 5 vital forces, and then we had to deal with the mind itself. If you total those up, pretty much you can find the 24 cosmic principles of Samkhya or the 32 cosmic principles of Shaivism. And if you go further than that, you can see the 92 cosmic principles listed in the Varaha Upanisad, who went overboard with it all. I think that's pretty much it, except that these are nice words to think about when you reach the apex of all of these, not just Mahayoga and Abhava Yoga, but Urnyata and Shunyata. We don't want to mix those up. They're both very high realizations. It's just said in Vedanta, we want to affirm that Shunyata, emptiness, wouldn't satisfy the soul, that Urnyata, fullness, satisfies the yearning soul. And emptiness is a very high stage along the way. A quick trip to this old chart that we haven't seen for a while, the synchronicity of iti and neti. Rather than playing them off against each other, we see how the whole thing works in tandem to reach, help us reach the highest realization. There are no doubt our souls that want to reach Abhava Yoga and dissolve everything for all times into the absolute reality. And there are also undoubtedly our souls who want to bring it all back with them and play it forward and give it to all of the 7 worlds as a great realization called Mahayoga. So these are just more by matter of temperaments, nature, and character than by superior or inferior ways of thinking. So good. Those 2 slokas we've made our way through. We'll be able to move on and have next week a 3rd class on this Atma Upanishad. Let's read sloka 3. With distinctions like teacher and disciple, Brahman alone appears. Nevertheless, from the point of view of truth, pure Brahman alone is. That's very important. If from the point of view of Maya or ignorance or delusion, Brahman can't be proved. It's not even seen by most people. But from the standpoint of truth itself, if you rise there, you see that, then you can make that great final statement, that Mahavakya. Brahman alone is. And everything else that appears as unreal or changing, or Saguna Brahman, or outer Atman, or mind and its projections. That's a very clarifying way of seeing it. And he says, even through distinctions like teacher and disciple, that's the case. So there's those 10 conditions that we look at of teacher and disciple, as taught by Yavatut and by Lord Vashishta as well in those two respective scriptures. So for section 2, sloka 3, he mentions this. Distinctions like teacher and disciples still doesn't change the fact that Brahman alone exists. Like some are more realized and some are less realized. Some are enlightened, some are not enlightened. Brahman still shines through it all. It's the point he's trying to make so that we don't forget the non-dual. Brahman alone shines. Even no matter whether you're practicing affirmation and negation, or whether you're a illumined soul or not, or a guru, a teacher, or a student, Brahman alone shines through. So we don't want to forget that. This is his main point, because then distinctions that are spiritual might begin to get in the way of our enlightenment. We can just look at these briefly. The main quote is, by worshiping the embodied guru devoutly, the disciple learns to follow the dictates of the infallible guru principle within himself or herself. Knowing that the Lord is present in the universe of name and form as the eternal companion in sport and as the compassionate guide in all trials and tribulations, lends a sense of peace and equanimity to the disciple's existence. From this calm, detached, and contented state of mind proceeds clear vision, as given to us by the Avatut in the Avatutta Gita. So if beings approach great teachers, as we've heard in various chants we've memorized, it will be first to hear the truth, Shruti, or maybe they heard the truth and then they go back to Guru to hear it again. Shruti means to hear, or that which must be heard. The second thing would be yukti, ability to contemplate on this truth. So some people can hear the truth and go away. You know, Sri Ramakrishna is saying you feed a pigeon and peas and corn, and then sticks in his craw for a while, right? And then you think you fed the pigeon, but then you pick the pigeon up and feel the craw, and it didn't go to the stomach to get digested. It's a very beautiful way of Sri Ramakrishna saying that he taught a lot of people with this highest truth, but it's stuck in their craw. It was never digested. So this is why 10 conditions of guru-disciple relationship are important. You have to go past just hearing it and maybe even just contemplating it. To number 3, strive to realize it. This is the truth. And how is that going to happen? Probably some neti is going to be, because you've attached some things that are unreal through your family life, through your birth, through your past existence, through society. Everyone's doing it, attaching to unreal things. So what kind of bad habits did I pick up from these various modes of life in relativity? I need to check that out with my teacher. And then the primal error of dual vision, as I was saying, will be destroyed, and suffering will go along with it. Number 4, then, across the board, is close scrutiny of reality. So Shruti, Yukti, Anubhava. The first 3 are very important. You could also call them Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Remember, we've studied the 3 proofs of truth on either side. But what happens after that? Atma Vichara must begin to examine and scrutinize reality, because before I couldn't see reality. like I was a scientist, I was looking at all sorts of uh, particles, you see. If I was a biologist, I was looking at all sorts of test tubes. So that was the mind in Maya studying Mayic things. That was the changing Maya, the changing mind studying the changing matter. But close scrutiny of reality, I needed to develop that after I heard what the truth was between the changing and the unchanging, neti, neti, iti, iti. And then I began to contemplate the truth and I began to realize it. And then I examined it deeper and deeper levels. That isn't done by scientists, biologists, and people. They're studying the changing Maya with the changing mind. You have to make the mind non-dual, silent, peaceful, motionless, static, focused on reality. And that's going to take those 3 proofs of truth that starts you out. Then number 5 is detachment from the unreal. The more you study the real, the more it begins to shake off the unreal. Like for instance, so you walk up to a swan, you see, or a dog, and you're going to pet it, and it's just been in the water, and it shakes off everything, gets you wet, you see. So in that way, if you study the unchanging Atman, then it'll shake off those water droplets of the unreal, of the changing. And then you'll see the whole thing as it is without all of those add-ons, without all of that covering. So that's how Vivarta, Nirodha proceeds. Nirodha means to destroy. Vivarta, false superimposition. Things that appear to be which aren't. You have to destroy them. That is, neutralize them, dissolve them, penetrate through them, get them behind you. Then the great disciple Sri Ram, looking at his great teacher, Lord Vashishta, what next, sir? What next, sir? Then you have number 6, Michachagi, renounce the unreal. So there again, you would have to say, I saw the real, I detached from the unreal, but I didn't renounce the unreal. So you see how very specific they are and how very careful they are that you're not holding anything, that you just saw it and you said, I see that that's not real. Thank you, sir, for showing that. Yes, but did you renounce it yet? I want to see it in your life. I want to see its action. That next time I see you, you're free of that. As Ramakrishna, if you read the gospel, you'd see his 16 direct disciples, they'd come back after having heard his words, Shruti, and then they'd still be suffering from something. Oh, I see you're not kind of dull today, he'd say. Come over here and let me talk to you. Or here, I'm going to write something on your tongue with my finger. Various things he did. Some of the things we don't know how he did it or why, how that was, what that meant. But he was able to see them again the next week and the next week until finally that thing that they were laboring under was gone, utterly gone. And that was all by using jnana and truth. Then Brahmashuddhi, and now that you have scrutinized reality, detached from the unreal, then renounce the unreal, what do? Brahman is standing forth. You meditate on Brahman. As I was saying, if you do it through the Ishtam, then Shiva will dissolve back into Brahman for you, and you'll see that light. I have seen the light. O ye children of immortal bliss, I have seen the light. And now they wanted to tell you about it, the rishis. They had reached the goal of human existence, and they wanted to communicate it to you and even transmit it to you so that you could do the same for your friends, family, and children. Then meditating on Brahman will allow you to acquire the definitive wisdom of wisdom. That's called non-dual or vijnanam. And that will destroy the subtle samskaras. Vinasha samskara. Vinasha means to destroy. And that will help you get into sthiti samadhi, merging and remaining in steady samadhi all of the time, like we saw Swami Vivekananda and like we saw Sri Ramakrishna. The Avadhut goes on further. Where the authentic Guru is present and the disciple is completely sincere, there occurs an implosion of such subtle and profound ramifications that it turns the course of the aspirant's entire existence, changing it forever. This amazing process happens swiftly or more slowly according to the practitioner's capacity and inherent karmas. So I say, on the positive side, give one lifetime to your sadhana, to your practice, to your dedication to Guru, Dharma, Sangha, and be patient and persevere, because some people have thicker veils in front of them than others. Like if Sri Ramakrishna was to speak to Swami Vivekananda, it would be a matter of days before. If Tottapati was to speak to Sri Ramakrishna about non-dual samadhi, it would be a matter of minutes or hours before that realization would dawn. So we all have to be reminded of this here in the heavy curtain of name, form, time, space, causality, called Maya. But once we do, then how quick is it going to be to thin and thin and thin out that curtain? And all of the concomitants that go along with that curtain of nescience, they call it, will also disappear. Because some of them are hiding in the 5 elements. Some of them are hiding in the 5 senses. A lot of them, of course, are hiding in the mind and ego. So this is why we do this step-by-step practice until the final goal is reached. And even then, the knowers of Brahman come forth and said, well done, well done. Like knowers of Brahman, like the Avadhut. So that's what we can do to unwrap a sloka like section 2, sloka 3 of the Atma Upanishad. And when that kind of unwrapping is done, again, we have these beautiful ways of singing it. Mukha basaka daprane drishamano mukhatvam pritak vena naivasti vastu chidabasako desho jivopi tadvat sanitya palabdis swarupam Naeko vibhati swatashuta chetaha prakasha swarupopi nanevadanahu sanabhasako yata vana murekaha sanitya palabdis swarupamatmam From the fruit in the palm of the hand stotram, the Avadhut sings. The reflection in a mirror is identical to the object reflected. So is the universe identical with the self when it's reflected in the mirror of pure mind. Thus are living beings perfect images of the eternal subject, the undying self. And that limitless self am I, identical with the Supreme Being. Absolutely unique, the ineffable essence, which is the source and origin of all. The primal Purusha, playfully manifesting itself in pure mind, who is the one impartial sun reflecting in the different water pots of various intellects. That one and I are identical. non-different, and inseparable. That one and I are non-distinct from one another. We are one cohesive unity. And he goes on with beautiful truth sayings like that, put in these 13 verses or slokas called the Hastamalakam Stotram. Then doing these processes and maintaining this guru-shishya relationship for long times, then you should be able to, as Holy Mother said, I can take my Atman outside, and look at it just as easily as you could pick up a fruit and see it in the palm of your hand. It's hasta amalaka. Amalaka is a fruit, hasta means hand. So that's what we want to be able to do ideally with our true nature. And so we want to become so absolutely certain of it through these steps of Guru Shiksha relationship that have been known from time out of mind and have liberated thousands and thousands of souls. Millions and millions have not got that liberation, it's true. But that's why we speak it and we also sing it, try and give us more inspiration to make that final effort. So moving on with the slokas in the time remaining, we have section 2.4. Neither knowledge nor ignorance, neither the world or anything else exists. Only Brahman alone exists. And so he makes a final point about that, is that always keeping the non-dual truth of Brahman insight, even when you're suffering from ignorance and you want free of it, and when you get knowledge and destroys that ignorance, then the conclusion of all is that going to be knowledge and ignorance never existed, really. Only the self exists, and I am one with that. Only Brahman exists, and I am the Atman. Because then people get into, I'm free now, but you were bound once. So what has to go is what has to occur is the idea that bondage never exists, and so freedom can't exist. You're always free. You're ever free. You're never bound. So what about that non-dual realization, insight? Where did that go in the process of going back and forth between all of these things? Did I become a professional student and I didn't ever become a master? Did I become a jack of all trades? Didn't even really know deeply one of them, and so forth and so on. And that means that you're going to have to keep this non-dual precious truth first and foremost in your mind, because it's non-dual my nature and thou art that. Last week we did mention this next sloka. What sets empirical life afoot is the appearance of the world as being real. What winds up empirical life is its appearance as being unreal. So the idea is that everything that we do in life just plays back into Maya. So everything that we're doing, everything we're thinking, all our acts and all our thoughts, if we're doing them divorced of this essential truth, non-dual truth that we keep emphasizing here, is that that's what's keeping empirical life afoot, he says. That's how the translator put it into English. The game's afoot, as Sherlock said. So basically, we see that people are just playing back into the process of Maya, samsaric wheel all the time. Ancestors, humans, gods, demigods, and subspecies too. Everything that they're doing is playing back into the empirical process. Empirical means like the world and its goings on. In other words, so this world, they're, so that's why just classifying the Baha Atman is not going to be enough, is it? Then you see how people who are doctors, scientists, physicists, I mean, everyone are examining the things in the outer self. They're not, of course, going to call it the self, but if we can put it in our own terms, that's what we would mean to say. And so that's keeping the empirical life going all the time. It's also keeping the births of lives of birth and death and rebirth going all the time. What stops that? What winds it up is its appearance of being unreal. So what sets it afoot, what looses it to run rampant in everyone's mind over lifetimes, is the thought that the world is real. It's one of the great things that Sri Ramakrishna said too. They their karmas bring them back to earth, their samskars and so forth. But then by living on earth, they become more and more convinced that earthly life is reality and this world is real. So that's stated in the Upanishads. But that person like Swami Vivekananda and others that came back to Sri Ramakrishna and asked him, is the world real? What's real? And he said, only Brahman's real, right from the Upanishads. When they found out that the world is not real, that wound up empirical life for them, and they became sannyasins. It's really very simple, but there are a lot of dynamics that both put the soul in bondage and let it free, finally. The beautiful thing is that we have it on good record that souls got free in our own time, and that there were great teachers that were able to free them, show them the doorway to freedom. So those are section 2 of the Upanishad, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A and B, they call it. And then the next point that he takes up when he makes the beautiful distinction about empirical life starting out and then empirical life ending right away. It's like a dream you had saying, no, I'm not going to dream anymore. And the dream stopped, right? At that point, then you were your Atman again. So what he wants to do, where he wants to go next with it is 2.5b. He says, what discipline is required to know that this is a pot? Except the adequacy of the means of right knowledge. Once that is given, the knowledge of the object itself supervenes. The ever-present self shines when the means of its cognition presents itself. So a little bit, he's taking us to a little bit more Zen koan-y kind of thickness of teaching, but he said basically the only thing required to know that this is a pot is the means of knowledge by which you ascertain that it's a pot. And that itself needs to be like called out and observed. Because then the ever-present self shines with that same cognition. You know, what means is it to know that I am the self? In other words, the same means by which knowing that was a pot, and I had no doubt about it. So now the very same means can be used, called higher cognition, to say that I am the self. And it's that very means of my own knowledge that makes that revealed. It's not coming from outside, like Gaudapada says. It's always coming from your own cognition, your own mind's correct thinking. So you may need to do some methods. You may need to follow guru and take teachings and so forth. At some time, then what will occur to you is just that simple. I'm not having any trouble with my own cognition seeing all of this before me. The only trouble I'm having is that I'm not seeing it as what it is. I'm like looking at the pot saying, that's not a pot. See, that would be wrong knowledge. But I can look at the pot and say, that's definitely a pot. Nobody's going to argue with me or disagree with me. So I have right means of knowledge for that, don't I? So take that very right means of knowledge and place it inside on your true self. True self. What is that true self? It's non-existent. I'm sorry, it illumines what is non-existent. It illumines and purifies what is illusory. It endows the Vedas, Shastras, and Puranas and all other scriptures with the light shine. It's ever free and content. It rejoices always in its own self. It's mighty, it says here. Though not eating, it's ever content. It looks upon all alike, but itself is peerless. Though acting, it does nothing. Though partaking of fruit, yet is not the experiencer of fruit. Though living in a body, it's still disembodied. Though determinate, it's omnipresent. It's never affected by pleasant and unpleasant or good and evil. Though it appears to have a body, it is the body of the liberated itself that remains like the shed slough of a snake. Though moved a little hither and thither by the vital breath, and is borne like a piece of timber up and down by the floodwaters, it's nevertheless stationary. Or by fate is the body born into contents of all experiences at appropriate times. On the contrary, that one giving up all migrations, that's transmigration, and going beyond both what is knowledge and unknowable, always remains the same as the pure unqualified self, manifest as Shiva. And that one is the best of all knowers of Brahman. In life itself is the foremost Brahman knower, is ever free. It has accomplished all its ends. So that's a series of slokas then starting from 5 on 7 through 21. And next week we can go on and look at the final 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11 slokas that we can finish up the third class with. So such is the Atma Upanisad, and we're seeing here that what's being described to us here, if you want to sort of slim it down, is the Paramatman or Shantatman, they call it here. To be meditated on by yogic steps of breath control, withdrawal of the senses, like in the Neti chart we looked at, fixity of mind, contemplated upon like a seed in a banyan tree, or a grain of millet, or the 100th part of the end of a split hair. It is to be known as birthless, deathless, free of all influences by the 5 elements. This is why in the Neti chart you started out saying, I'm not the 5 elements. It's to be looked at as beyond the 3 gunas, as the detached spectator of all phenomena. That, of course, will appeal more to this, with your distinguishing between Nyaya and Mimamsa and so forth. You'll be able to separate out the wheat from the chaff, as they say, and be the spectator of all phenomena. It's also partless. It's ever independent. Again, it means never bound, so never gotten free. It's just independent by its very nature. It's pure, blemishless, subtlemost, beyond the 5 senses, which we looked at again in the Neti analysis. Omnipresent, it's the purifier of all that is impure. That is, shows the abiding nature of Brahman behind all changing things, so it automatically purifies the impure. It's actionless and not subject to empirical existence, as I saved that one for the end, because it's such a beautiful contrast he makes there between empirical life set afoot in empirical life, winding up when you realize what the difference between the real and the unreal. So that brings us into about 2/3 through the Atma Upanishad. And in that way, I think we can find a good ending place here, and end with our usual chants. And since this is Jagadatri Puja Day, we can sing about the Divine Mother a little. Devim prasadam pranatar jihantrim yogindra pujam yugadharma patrim tam sharadam bhakti vigyana datrim daya swarupam pranamami nityam. O Sharada, propitious goddess, killer of misery and souls resigned, savior of religion in every age, by saints and sages worshipped, O Mother kind, give us love and wisdom thou. O grace incarnate, to thee we bow. Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Toye Shritva Pranamami Mahor Mahor Pranamami Mahor Mahor. Shanti, 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 Hari Om, Hari Om.